Good afternoon, everyone. It is a beautiful day, and as usual, I'm just gonna give a couple of seconds to allow you guys to come in before we start the business of the day. For those of you on break, those in the office, those working at home, how have you guys been? How is the weather this morning? Here down in Philly, the weather is kind of chilly. It rained the whole of last night. I can see we've got a couple of, some numbers of people on my attendees list. Again, I will just take it off from here, even as people keep joining us. Good afternoon once again and welcome. For those of you guys that are joining us for the first time, my name is Kagba Esahaya, and I'm the training coordinator with the Temple Small Business Development Center. The Temple Small Business Development Center helps small businesses start and grow. We offer free one-on-one consulting and a variety of low to no cost webinars. We are proud to be part of the nationally accredited network of the Small Business Development Centers, which has over 1,000 networks across the United States. You are here this afternoon for a webinar on WordPress for Beginners 3, Build Your Site Part 2. A copy of the PowerPoint and a link to the recording will be sent to all the attendees. Being a webinar, we always encourage you guys to drop your question on the Q&A or the chat box. Today is indeed a good day. The main reason why I say that is because I've got a good speaker to unleash what it takes for us to build our WordPress. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome Ms. Jane even as she takes over the floor for the presentation. Ms. Jane, you are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. This is probably my most favorite webinar to do because it continues to blow my mind every time I take a look at, how people hijack your website. So let's just get into it. Today, we're going to talk about securing your website. A little bit about me. I'm the co-founder and creative director of BrandSwan. I'm a graphic designer and front-end web developer, which was my bread and butter, which is how I kind of got started. I've been designing websites for over 19 years. So I know this. I got you guys. About BrandSwan, we do beautiful brands, savvy websites, and marketing that matters. And that is my co-boss Jen there to the left. So we're going to talk about these 3 points: how hackers access your website, the best practices, and popular security tools and programs. So at least when you leave here, you'll have an idea of what you need to do if you haven't been doing it already. So in order for us to get to the solution, we have to talk about how do websites even get hacked, right? So the first one is access control. Sounds a little intimidating, but let me kind of summarize it. So when someone hacks into your control access, what that means is that the user itself has been authenticated and given access to the system, and then they exploit that system. So, for example, let's say you don't have your user roles set up correctly, and a subscriber suddenly has admin privileges, or they use a plugin in order to get admin privileges, and then that's how they get in. So every login point needs attention. So think about your hosting account, your domain logins, your FTP logins, the website WordPress logins, even your passwords to other websites. So I like this one, but you may have locked the front door, but if you left the window open, it provides an opportunity for someone to get in. And out-of-date plugins is a big culprit too. All right. So here's some other tactics. Brute force. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this one, but basically what happens is the hacker attempts to guess their username and password like over and over and over again until they get it. Now, if you have a very long and complicated password like you're supposed to, although I wonder who's guilty, if your username is admin and your password is password, the bots and scripts that these hackers develop, they're just going to get right in with that information. So just know that. Phishing and malware. So what happened is the hackers build phishing pages and emails designed to trick you. So they might get you to enter your username and password as if you think you're logging into your bank account, but really they're just capturing that information and then logging into your bank account, right? Insecure networks and data breaches. So your credentials can be intercepted. So let's say you're at a cafe, you're not on a secure network, you log into your bank, someone sitting in that cafe could be looking for that and they intercept your information that way. 32% of all data breaches involve phishing emails. 32%. So you might, what should you look for? Here's an example of a phishing email, and it looks super oafish, right? So claim your tax refund online. There was an error and you're about to get $400. Please click get started below to claim your refund. Now, when you click on get started, it's going to look like a government website. They can probably clone it pretty closely, but the trick is in the URL. It might just say something like irs.gov.com or something like that. I'm sure that's spam. So it's really not irs.gov, but they try to trick you if you're not looking too closely. And this is a great way. This is an example of a phishing email. So why? Why do hackers do it? All right, what do you guys think? Why do hackers want to hack your website? Go ahead and pop it in the chat for me. What's the point? Why do they want to hack your site? Hack no cheating, because I think you actually might have been to this seminar before. Yeah, that's great. Ransomware, their customer list. Very good, Victor. No one's ever guessed that before, and I wasn't even thinking that. That's a good idea. You're big on the topic. Cool, Pat. All right. So here's the answers. Credit information, absolutely. All right. We got a lot of these. Here are some examples. So what do they want to do? They want to disrupt your service. So I almost wonder, like, I wish I could be a fly in the wall in a boardroom, right? And maybe the people at Amazon, you know how we could, we could beat Overstock.com. We should just hire a hacker, disrupt their website, then no one can buy there and they have to come to us. Like, I just wonder, like, if they're that brutal to steal money, ransomware, to steal valuable information, credit cards, social security information, customer lists, or they want to provide black hat SEO services. And I'm going to get into that in the next slide. Because they can. All of the above is why hackers want to hack your website. Yeah, because they can. Yeah. So the more visibility you have on the search engines, the increased risk. Who here has ever gotten an email that says, hey, your website SEO sucks. You need to hire us. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but you need to hire us to fix your rankings. We can get you a #1 on Google, right? Do you know how they got your information? Because you have decent SEO. They found you somehow, and it was probably through the search engine. So they find people who care about their rankings, and then they try to exploit that. That's just an example. Now they're technically not a scamming service. They could be right, because SEO is a point system. So you might not be hitting every check mark or every box for the SEO. But yeah, so the more visibility you have, that means the scripts are finding you. And really what they're doing is they're looking for websites that have certain plugins so that they can exploit it. Any questions so far on anything I've talked about? So that is how hackers hack your website and why they want to do it. Feel free to add your question and answer, or just pop it in the chat box. I'll give you guys a second. I wish I could see when people were typing. All right, I'm gonna go. That was pretty thorough. No one has any questions. I like it. Well, we have one. Thank you, Jacqueline. How about our personal info is exploited because anyone can look up our name or pay for look up our info? So yes, I have a personal story. If you want to know my personal story, you can contact me afterwards, but I had a really bad stalker and when I was younger, and they were able to just purchase online public record thing, right? But the problem is that if you were to go to the courthouse today, anyone can go get that information. So they're thinking, well, it's already public, so now it's just public online. So if someone wants to stalk you, you can't prevent that. But I would, yeah. If you're being stalked, you definitely, take a journal of it. As far as getting your personal information, I try not to make decisions out of fear when I put my presence online. Just know that whatever you put online is going to be there forever because oh, domain. Okay, another question. So I hope I answered your question. The answer is you really can, but protect yourself. You can use privacy for your domain names, not put your contact information on the website. The only problem is that people do that, and then the people don't really get to see you online on your website, right? So if you're afraid to put your name and your picture out there, then no one can really like you, get to like you more. So just think about that. GoDaddy's offering domain theft. How does that work? Well, I think that's a money grab. If your domain is locked in your account, there isn't really a domain theft. No one can transfer the domain away from you if it's locked in your account. Just keep track of your passwords, know where your domain is registered, and then I don't think anyone can take it from you because you're going to get notified even if someone attempts to transfer the domain away from you. One other tip I will say is that if you buy the domain in your name if possible before you work with a web developer. Because typically what happens is someone like me might work with someone who's not very tech savvy. And so I'll set up their domain for them. I'll put everything in their name, but at the end I do a transfer of ownership. And I kind of explain to them, this is the information you need to have and what it does. So, just having that transparency, but if you set it up at a domain register already, then you have total control of it from the get-go. Okay. Software and third-party vulnerabilities. Okay, this is a big one. This is how WordPress gets hacked, right? So WordPress is one of the most common CMSs out there, the most popular by far. And the only downside is that as technology keeps updating, the plugins have to keep updating. And sometimes the updates are security based, like, oh no, we found a vulnerability in this part of the software. And so that's why it's really important that if you are on a WordPress site, you want to update your plugins at least once a month. All right, so everyday web technology can be a vulnerability. And the messed up thing, guys, is that a lot of it's completely outside your control. So I have a poll on the next slide. So hackers take advantage of current web technology, and that's how they gain access. So some examples are the following: the software that your server runs. So let's say you go to GoDaddy, set up a hosting account, their Apache program that runs that server could have a vulnerability. The WordPress platform could have a vulnerability. A theme or plugin could have a vulnerability. Even web languages, even things that make your website do cool things, like animating and faded menus. So JavaScript, PHP, Ajax, Java, all that stuff can have huge vulnerabilities. In fact, your own web browser can have a vulnerability. So literally everything is vulnerable and you can only do the best you can. And in business, so long as you do your due diligence, you're not going to be held liable if your web server gets hacked, right? I mean, I'm not sure what's happened, but here's a really common hack. Oh, Lord. Here's a comment. And this is, by the way, an example of black hat SEO. So what happens is, we call the pharmacy hack. So when you go to your website and you type in brandswan.design, that's mine, obviously, and you bring up your website, it looks good, you're moving right along. But if someone were to Google graphic designer Delaware and my listing come up and they click on that listing, a website that has been hacked will redirect to another file on your server that is Viagra and pills and other pharmaceutical drugs. So, and the user usually never knows, because how often do you Google yourself and click on your name? I actually do a lot, but that's my business. So I've inherited websites. Maybe like they didn't have anyone maintaining their website. They let it go for years, and they had no idea that their website is redirecting to a pharmaceutical website. So that's the fun part. And why do they do it? That's so they can get people to buy their products. I don't quite get it, because I just get mad. I don't really feel like I need to buy their products, but I guess it's working. I mean, they keep doing it, so it must work. So here are some companies who have been hacked in 2021. Now that we're getting more in 2022, I'll probably update this list very soon. But Colonial Pipeline, they paid a ransom in Bitcoin. T-Mobile, Parler, Kroger, Barnabas, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn via Social Arcs. So Social Arcs was a third-party app that integrated Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and I believe like found their customer list and not exploited, but had sensitive data they shouldn't have had, and it's a long story. Volkswagen and Audi. Colonial Pipeline paid $2.3 million in Bitcoin. And why do they want Bitcoin? Because it's not exactly trackable, right? It's an official currency. Sometimes they might make you send them, gift cards. And if anyone wants a payment iTunes gift cards, trust me, don't give it to them. It's so bad now that I was at a store yesterday and there was a sign that says, stop. If someone asks you to pay them in gift cards, don't do it. Gift cards are for gifts. So that's always fun. But yeah, 2.3 million just to get their data back so that they can continue functioning as a company. All right, guys, yes or no, has your data been involved in a data breach? And if so, one company? I've had lots of hacks. In fact, T-Mobile got hacked, right? That was on the list. And now they just pay pretty much identity theft security for free to other customers. And I don't know, I've had it for like 5 years now. I don't know if it's ever going to run out, but so that was their way of kind of correcting what had happened. All right, Jacqueline says, I had someone hack into my website and remove it, and I constantly moderate it now, and something is usually that I feel could it be an inside job. Well, I will say though that unless you clean a website thoroughly, sometimes there's still back doors open. And if you don't solve the problem that made it get hacked in the first place, then it's going to keep happening. So I'd hire a pro to kind of fix it. And I would also change all your passwords, Jacqueline. Another Jacqueline or Jacelyn, let me know. Capital One, yeah, definitely. I always thought that Facebook people just wanted attention or to be left alone when they said their account was hacked, but mostly they were troublemakers on Facebook anyway. Well, what I will say is what tends to happen, Jacqueline, okay, good, thank you. I should have stuck with my first gut reaction. Well, what happens is these people on Facebook, they clone an identity and then they start reaching out to all their friends. And next thing you know, they might start asking them for money or whatever. So that's what that's about. It's kind of like a catfish, basically. All right, so let's talk about best practices for website security. Pat, are you rubbing your hands together like, oh yeah, this is the juicy bits, right? Best practices. Okay, so this is my #1 must-have product. It doesn't have to be LastPass. It can be any other password manager, but you gotta trust me because life's too short to remember all your passwords. And it's too dangerous to have the same password for all your websites. Because if you do get hacked somewhere, then they have that information and they can just start applying it everywhere. So once they know your email address, right, now they kind of have your username for a lot of things. So get LastPass or another one. Unfortunately, I don't know another one, and I'm not getting paid to recommend LastPass, just FYI. It's just something I like to use. So set it up. Then you only have to remember one master password, and then it will pre-fill everything for you, which I love. So that's a great start. The second thing is that you can generate with this application a password, and it does look like this. It's gobbledygook. It's like FDJ, blah, 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 blah. But let me go back. But the chances of them guessing that password will never break it. You know, especially if on your website, if you have a lock feature, which I'll go into soon. But yeah, they're never going to guess this password by just, you know, trying and trying and trying. So definitely make your usernames different from your website name. That's a tip number one. So if your website is brandswan.design, don't have your username be brandswan, because they're just going to guess that immediately, right? So I just usually make a username completely random. I try not to have any patterns. I guess you could have patterns if it makes it easier for you to, you know, generate them. But I might even look at something I'm drinking and be like, okay, my password is now Monster FMT3, you know. Excuse me. Make them strong. Even if you don't feel like using parentheses and numbers and capitalizations, make it a really long passphrase. For example, I went to the bank, my dog got a treat. Like, that's super long password, and that will be equally as hard to break as this gobbledygook here. So this is really setting you up for success. So that way, if something gets hacked, it's isolated. It's not going to affect everything you do. All right, don't do this to me, guys. I don't want to see any of these variations. So these are the most don't use these password combinations. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know, shocking. I wonder if wordy, like QWERTY is also really popular. Picture one, password, yeah, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So yeah, don't use these. All right. So when you're on a hosting account, especially if you're a company that's been around a while, these web design companies typically don't message you like, hey, guess what? There's better technology out there for you. They're still going to continue to charge you what the service was 10 years ago with as little resources as possible, right? Because that's the most profitable for them. So if you haven't looked into your web hosting situation, I'd recommend that you do that immediately, because one of the biggest security issues is what version of PHP you're on. And that's in your cPanel. So and your cPanel password should be different as well. So typically when you have a hosting account, you log in, then there's like a site tools or like a cPanel. We have more options and you can see all sorts of stuff, right? The PHP version is always in there. Old accounts can't go very high, but I think the latest is like 8 or something. You don't want to be bleeding edge. You just want to use the most stable version. And be aware that if you do have an older site, things might start breaking as you upgrade your PHP version. So it's a tough one. You're gonna have to invest some money to bring it up to code, basically. And I think it really just depends on how secure the data is and if you're storing any data versus passing it off. And I'll talk more about that. See what time it is. Okay, cool. I got plenty of time. So if you're running a custom coded website, like something done by hand, you could just get like a server hosting scanner. I mean, you know, they have the less your website does, the less chance it'll get hacked, because the more stuff you start installing in all these scripts, then that's just more vulnerabilities, right? So you can also limit file types your users can upload. And I think WordPress kind of does this by default. So if you try to upload an exe file, it's going to be like, what, stop. So there's plugins you can install that could limit files even further. I would literally just search for like, you know, limit file type and pick the highest rated one. When you're using plugins, I would definitely not pick anything below a 4.2 rating. If it's 3 stars, just don't risk it, you know. And you want to pick something that has thousands of ratings if possible. because they've been tried and tested, right? I always have a couple backups on file, so make sure that you have a backup. And don't just back it up like once a week. You might want to back it up once a month and then once a week, because what if you don't realize there was an issue and a month has passed, then your latest backups have already overwritten the one good part about your website. So try not to back up too much. And of course, keep your CRM updated at least once a month. And CRM in this case is just WordPress. You get in there and make sure everything's up to date, including the themes. In fact, I would delete any themes you're not using on WordPress. Even the WordPress default ones like 20, 21, 22. Just get rid of them. Install an SSL. And you'll know you have an SSL if you have the padlock up here on the top, right? So what this stands for is security sockets layer, which is why we call it SSL. It encrypts data during transit. So I'm going to go into that a little bit later. By a little bit later, probably like 30 seconds. But basically, it encrypts the data from here to here. So it's really a basic security measure, especially for e-commerce websites. But now what's happened is Google said, you know what? Any website doesn't have a security SSL, we're going to prioritize less than the people who have it. It also became a little bit of a misleading item because it would have a red unbroken lock here, and if you hovered over it, it would say website not secure. And so you would think that you're going to get malware or something if you clicked on it, which isn't really true. So unfortunately, we all have SSL now, but really it's just a way to kind of solidify the domain ownership more than anything, I think. So definitely have one. And a lot of more modern hosting accounts, they give them away for free. They're called Let's Encrypt. GoDaddy is slowly working on kind of being competitive with those companies. So you might find that they're changing. But with GoDaddy, it was like $80 a year. So, all right. True or false? An SSL certificate prevents your website from being hacked. I think so, Pat. True or false? An SSL certificate prevents your website from being hacked. All right, this might surprise you, but it's false. So an SSL has one job, and that's to get information from one place to the other securely. What does that mean? Example, you're buying a pair of shoes and you send in your payment. The SSL really kicks in when you send the order, and it goes securely from your browser to the server where it manages all that. But when you're outside the tunnel on either end, you're not really secure. So unless you're traveling from the browser to the server, you're not secure. You're just browsing the web, basically. So it doesn't prevent any of the other stuff we talked about. If your website has out-of-date plugins, it's still going to get hacked. So SSL is definitely part of PCI compliance, and we're taking credit cards over the internet. I think I talk about that more later. So yeah, the biggest question is what happens when you reach your destination and you're out of the tunnel? You know, you're back on the market for getting hacked. So is security your responsibility? Ultimately, you're going to take ownership of whatever's working for you, but online website builders. So let's talk about Squarespace, Wix, WordPress.com, not to be confused with WordPress.org, site builder, etc. So all of these websites that you log into that like an online experience, you're using like their templates, that's typically a website builder. Now they use their own proprietary platforms. So what that means is they handle all the software. If you set up payments through them, they're handling all that PCI compliance and SSL. So if you're using one of those type of website builders, you don't even have to sweat it. Now, if your custom coded website ends in .html, .aspx, .php, your website's may be hand coded, and you want to contact your web developer for an audit to make sure that you're good. Then you have your popular CRMs and CRM, by the way, stands for Content Management System. This is why we say CRM. Like WordPress, Joomla, WooCommerce. Security is our responsibility. And when you're processing payments online, you're subject to the PCI compliance, which stands for Payment Credit Industry or something. So if you're using the Visa or MasterCard, et cetera, to process payments, they have rules for you to follow. And one of them is to have an SSL. Yeah. So what is PCI compliance? A set of requirements intended to ensure that all companies that process, store, or transmit credit card information maintain a secure environment. And SSL is like our due diligence, really. So here are the 12 requirements. And I'm going to go over here. I'm going to kind of skim over these, but maintain a firewall configuration. Now, if you're using a server, a hosting server that's shared, that's already taken care of for you. Do not use vendor supply defaults or system passwords. So you have to do your due diligence to be secure and use strong passwords. Protect stored credit card data. Now, most of the websites that we do, honestly, we do something called capture. So we don't store any of our clients' credit card information because we don't want that kind of liability. Actually, there is cyber liability insurance if this concerns you, but they're going to give you a list of things that you need to do for your website in order for them to actually start securing you. And it might look something like this. So what we do with the capture is that we usually install, like, let's say you're processing payments with Stripe or PayPal. We will install a plugin for that just sends the information to PayPal securely, and then they process it and store it where they want, So again, that takes the pressure off us, because that's, if our website gets hacked and they have all that credit card information there, that's bad, right? It's terrible. So we just ignore that responsibility completely by just sending it on, right? You have to have like antivirus software programs. You just need to maintain it, keep it updated. Restrict access, so not all user roles can see the client information. Assign a unique ID to each person with computer access. That one I'm actually not sure about. I don't really know what that means, but next time I'll probably know. Regularly test security systems and processes, maintain a policy that addresses information for all personnel. So yeah. So this is PCI compliant, but if you're using some of the online builders, they take care of all this for you. And it's really not as scary as it sounds. If you work with a developer, they will be able to guide you through this. And this will just be something in the back of your head that you know is kind of being taken care of so you can sleep at night. But this is what really goes into. So if you talk to a designer and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive to install e-commerce. Well, this is why. So if you're using a third party to process payments, PayPal, Stripe, etc., those parties handle all the PCI compliance for you. They're also a really great way to get started with e-commerce because, they have reasonable fees. They have like a small transaction fee, and then it's like 3%, which is standard. And that's really great if you're selling like a low volume stuff. Once you get like 20K in every month, you probably want to do something different. All right, let's talk questions, guys. Okay. Oh, got stuff. Okay. Cool. Jacqueline says, I had banks bill out for a few thousand, but I monitor my account and fraud protection kicked in. I had this done to me for about 4 times, and once they would not give it back. Oh no, that's terrible. Maybe switch banks. Pat says, yeah, it seems like an unnecessary money grab for sites that don't do e-commerce. Basically, yes. Jackson number 2 says, some websites encourage our payment methods to be saved. How are our payment info protected? Well, I'm going to say, like, for example, those type of websites, like let's talk about Amazon. They've got crazy security. Like they are they do not want to get hacked. So they're on top of it, especially because they're in the hosting business too. So if they get hacked, it's going to look super bad for them. So I would trust that they would try really hard. I'd also, if Stripe or PayPal ask you to save your information, feel free to do that. But if it's a website you're only ordering like 1 or 2 things from, or it's not a recurring subscription, you don't have to save your card if you don't want to. I know I have identity theft protection and I'm not afraid. I'll tell you what, no one has ever like gotten money from me. So yes, someone like hacked into an Adobe account, or I think it was Home Depot. Just everyone, like all the big guys, they get hacked, they get my information. What did they get? They probably got my credit card, maybe, I don't know, but they never used it. And I think it's because my passwords are I'm very secure with my information. So they probably only had one part of the puzzle, but they didn't have the rest of the 3, so they couldn't do anything with it. So I'm telling you, good habits will, I think, put you in a good spot. Pat says, I think that just means not to share login and credentials. Yeah, I think so too. I know it's a duh statement, but I would also say, if you guys want to oh, I got a question over here. Hold tight. I will say though that I forgot what I was going to say. So I'm going to read Jacqueline's question. I got distracted. Jacqueline, Nicole, basically we just asked for the best security and monitor it frequently. What platform are you on, Jacqueline? Like, how are you selling your products? Or yeah, who are you asking for the security? You just pop it in chat. Okay. Yeah, let me know. So just ask the best security and monitor it frequently. I wouldn't ask the best security because sometimes it's a money grab. So long as you're like, you keep everything up to date, you have a security plugin already installed, you're pretty much good to go. All right. Oops. Okay. So let's talk. Oh, hold on, I got one more question. Nope, I'm done. Okay. So best programs and tools to secure your WordPress website. Now I'm talking specifically about WordPress here because WordPress is pretty user-friendly and you guys can go and do it right now. You don't have to wait for developers. So this is why I kind of want to cover WordPress. These are my favorite recommended WordPress plugins. Now, if you have a nice server and you have lots of resources, WordFence might be a good thing for you because it does have a firewall, it does have security, but it's a resource hog. So just be aware about that. It also can support dual authentication. There's lots of plugins that you can use for that. I have to say, I really, really hate dual authentication because I'm not like Velcro to my phone, unfortunately. I hate my phone, but sometimes it's dead, to be honest. So I'm like, oh, can't find it because I looked at battery drain, but that's one way to do it. Also, I find that with dual authentication, it's hard to work as a team, especially if you just have one user. WordFence also has paid options, but it's really good if you're really just nervous about everything. There's a free option for WordFence. If you want the dual authentication, you might have to pay, but there's a premium version. But there's definitely a free plugin somewhere that does dual authentication, so you can kind of combine it with other plugins. So for most of our websites, what I typically, because we are actually in charge of updating all the websites on our server that we host, so I know that that's a security risk, that's not a thing. So to make my website faster, I typically just install Loginizer and WP Hide login. Let me tell you what these things do. So the WPS Hide login, what that does is, instead of logging into, brandswan.design/WP-admin, I can change that login to say WP Fruit Loops, something completely off the wall. And that would actually go to the login page. So what does that prevent? Brute attacks. So now, because you've changed the login page, the bots can't even start guessing your passwords because they don't know what the login is. So that's my number one tactic. Number two tactic is Loginizer. Now, and there's others, by the way, guys, these are just the ones I really like. Loginizer, it limits login attempts. So if someone, and you can customize it. So let's say you have someone who knows the login and they keep entering the wrong password. They do it like 3 times. What happens is Loginizer says, you're locked out for 24 hours. You gotta wait 24 hours before you can try to log in again. So that prevents people who aren't supposed to be there. It also, again, just prevents that brute attack. Yoast SEO, this is an SEO plugin, but I really like it because you can show in high contents in the search engines. So if you don't want something on the web, you can kind of hide it. So only people with the link can view it. You could also install really simple SSL, which basically automatically rewrites your links so that all the content being loaded is being loaded securely. So if you're on WordPress and you're trying to do a page and you're adding a link to something, maybe it's a script to bring the weather in. If it just says HTTP and not HTTPS, it won't load. Because that's not secure content, and browsers decide what to do about that, depending which ones you use. Firefox is, I think, one of the most strictest. So if you use really simple SSL and automatically rewrite all the HTTPs, HTTPS, you're going to find that your images and things that you had brought in suddenly start working again. So little bit of troubleshooting there. So like I said, choose a plugin that has at least 4 stars and thousands of ratings, because they're the best. All right, so you have all this information. Now what? Here's what I want you guys to do. And don't worry, you're going to get a copy of the presentation. I want you all to strengthen your passwords immediately. I want you to change all your passwords. So that way, each website you have a login with, the password is different. Get LastPass so you can organize all of that. So you have to kind of start with the base. I realize strengthening all your password has nothing to do with website security per se, but if you have this mindset, every new user you make, you're gonna fix the problem. Check server security. So I want to see you upgrading your servers, figuring out what PHP version you are on, and making sure that you have an SSL. If you're taking payments, you want to make sure you're following PCI compliance. And that's only if you're accepting and storing online payments. Install programs and tools. So that way your site's protected, and you want to keep all your stuff up to date, from the WordPress itself to the plugins to the themes. And I want you to delete things that you aren't using. If you're not using a plugin and it's just sitting there deactive, get rid of it. Because that's, again, one thing that can be exploited. So keeping your website up to date is key, and finding the right tools to do so. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the website security action steps here. One thing that you might want to consider: who here works in the cloud? Maybe you use Gmail, the G Suite. You do Google Sheets. Maybe you went to Microsoft Office 365 and now you're doing stuff online. Or you have a Google Drive and you have client files on there. You want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence with client files. So before we went to LastPass, what I would do is I would have a TXT file, like a notepad, with all my passwords in it in a document. Well, what happens when we went to the cloud for a server? Now all those passwords are being uploaded there. So we thought, that's probably not a good practice. What is our due diligence here? So what we did was we took all of them off, we moved them into LastPass so that they're secure. So that's me storing client information. I didn't get it directly from the website, but again, just keeping that top of mind. How are you protecting your client data? think about that as well. That goes past your credit card payments and your website. But when you have that information, how are you securing it? So that's a little bit tip. I'll probably write in here. All right, more questions. What do we got? We have, let me see what time it is. We have about 15 minutes of questions. So feel free to go ahead. Ask away. I'll let you guys kind of type that up in a second. So these are just some references that I use to kind of build a presentation. Feel free to click on them and learn more about them. You're also welcome to schedule a call with me if you want to talk something personal about your specific situation. And you can also join our Facebook group because we support each other and just help each other along this crazy thing called work. So yes, that is us. You're welcome. Here we go. Do you know if you have to worry about your PHP version if you have a managed WordPress site? Pat, are you on GoDaddy? You are, aren't you? You are. I just know it. Their back end looks a little bit different than cPanel. But if you don't see, you should see PHP versions. So look for something called PHP versions. Usually you can search your tools and that will tell you. If you're in a managed WordPress site, they probably started you on the latest version, but a lot of servers don't automatically update it because of all the moving parts. Because if you install plugins, there's many plugins, by the way, that aren't, they might be a little abandoned and they don't work with new PHP versions. And that's just going to be an individual basis. You're just going to have to check and see which plugins that is. But possibly nothing breaks. I would say that's getting a lot better. Very little breaks anymore for me. But that's because they follow some rules, like using plugins that are very highly rated and have been used forever, because the developers, they're not abandoning anything. They're constantly updating it, so it's going to be around a while. It's something that isn't going to. Oh, I will say sometimes that website might go down for like a day. Maybe like this plugin is no longer working and you're like, oh, I can't update my website. But then within like hours, it's fixed. Like we have an update for it. So you don't have to wait a whole long time if that happens, but it is possible. But just do it and see what happens. If it breaks, revert it back. If you don't see that at all, Pat, then it's probably managed for you. Any other questions? Okay, well, you guys know where I am. If you want to talk, I got one more. What steps should we take if our website has been hacked? Honestly, I would install WordFence and I would let it do a scan and go nuts and have it, quarantine, delete things that aren't supposed to be there. So try WordFence plugin. If it's your actual website and it's not on a WordPress site, then you want to call your host, and they usually have like a virus scanner and can help you with it, or call a developer. Okay.
Jen, thank you very much. Just a quick one. I just posted a 30-second survey about today's webinar. This goes to our wonderful attendees. Remember, we at Temple SPDC, we always cherish your feedbacks, even as it helps us to improve on the services we provide to you guys at a low cost. Kindly take 30 seconds of your time to help us to fill out, the survey link I just posted. Jen, do we still have any other question?
I think we're good. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much. You asked really good questions. And Pat, I'll see you tonight, I guess.
Okay. To wrap it up, I just want to use this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for keeping it a day with us. I made a mistake at the beginning of the presentation, and I would like to correct it. I actually said the presentation was on WordPress. That was a mistake from my side. My bad. I am very sorry for that. It's a web site planning series, Let's Secure Your Website. In addition to that, I want to thank Jenny for a wonderful presentation. I love the way everything flows, the questions that comes up, sorry, the question that actually came up during the presentation, and the way everything flowed was just perfect. And this also goes to our wonderful, attendees. Thank you for your time once again. And lastly, but not the least, I want to thank my wonderful Temple SPDC colleagues for their usual support. Without them, this webinar wouldn't have definitely come to pass. Thank you for your
Thank you,
encouragement and
Temple.
support. Yeah, without further ado, I think we just wrap it up from here. Bye-bye and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.